St. Luke tells the story of the trip to Jerusalem happening every year. And in some ways that speaks to us of the things we do repeatedly. But then the story deepens. There was a great surprise, a little bit like the original Home Alone. Where was Jesus and who was he with? The surprise. At the end of every year, it's the norm now to see those in memoriams, those special services at the end of a newscast, at the end of the year. Perhaps at the end of 2021, we took a double loss. The burial of the beloved peacemaker, the truth and reconciliation man, the evangelical, wonderful priest, pastor, and Archbishop Desmond Tutu, laid to rest in the fullest honor and love, not just of his own South Africa, but of the world. We all remember, who are old enough, the day that he stood beside Nelson Mandela when Mandela was freed from prison. A hallmark day on the face of the earth. The other loss that we're talking about right now was Betty White. Could there be a greater difference? Except that just a few days short of her 100th birthday, she's remembered for her disposition, her love of animals, and her sort of saucy wit. Every year, we look back and see the things that were extraordinarily different. Jesus didn't come back with his parents, and the things that were the same. Every year they went to Jerusalem. On Thursday at the chapel Zoom, we read a little paragraph from Diana Butler Bass. I'd like to share that with you. A new year, she wrote, also gives us a chance to reset where we might go. A reset isn't a fix. It's an opportunity to reassess, readjust, and recommit. The trolls are still here. The threats are still with us. But what can we do better in the next 2 to 3 months to mitigate harm, to love our neighbors, and frankly, to care for ourselves? We can't make it all better in a day. We can, however, take small steps each day toward healing, justice, and compassion. This isn't a year, she wrote, for big resolution. It's a year to keep walking, even when the way is weary and the destination not clearly in sight. A new year is only magical when we shine light into the darkness, when we choose to bless the world. It isn't time to wait for miracles to happen, for some ritual to chase away what bedevils us. However hard it seems, we keep on, knowing that calendar pages don't determine the course of our lives. There is always another candle to light. It isn't about a ritual or making a resolution. It's about what burns in our hearts. Those words help us as we look back on an extraordinary year. We heard the word unprecedented almost weekly in the news, didn't we? And the things that were considered once in a lifetime were happening twice in a decade. When you look back at the major headlines here in British Columbia, they are startling for their effect on our climate and our climate's effect on us. Some of the big images that come to mind, of course, are Lytton. The wildfire raging through that village in hours. And then the other scorching wildfires in our province, in so many places. The effects on farming, on villages, as well as on the mercantile sector. It seemed like there was a new fire every day. And in British Columbia, we owe a debt of gratitude to firefighters from as far away as Australia and Mexico who came to help us. The skies were choked with smoke all over the province. And then we were still to deal with the Kamloops graves, the discovery of 215 or more unmarked graves on the site of the former residential school in Kamloops, and then more to be discovered in Saskatchewan and in other places of British Columbia. And we know that story will continue in 2022. There were calls to take action, to remove the Indian Act, to do other things. And we knew that every time this happened, dear heart people were reliving deep-set, multi-generational trauma. The hope is that in the new year, the Pope will come to Canada to meet face-to-face with the First Nation residential school survivors. Another story was unfolding in British Columbia that had international implications. And that was the story of the two Michaels and the odd extradition case going on in downtown Vancouver. Who will forget the sight of the Michaels coming home, being embraced by our Prime Minister somewhere in the darkness of night as they finally returned back to Canada in the end of September. A moment of delayed justice, but nonetheless heartwarming. And so the list goes on. In the fall and early winter, we saw the floods in the Fraser Valley, massive loss of livestock, hundreds of cows and chickens, farms still underwater, the Coquihalla, the highways. On it goes. So how do we find that light that Diana Butler-Bass talked about? How do we, as Christians, as people seeking to follow the path of the one who did light the lights, how do we do that? It seems to me that at this time we do exactly as she suggested. We take it in short spaces, 2 or 3 months at a time. We remember the work of Desmond Tutu and let it inspire us. His ardent belief in forgiveness, not easy. We also work then to work our own hearts to be more compassionate to those suffering as he suffered and as so many other people have suffered from racial injustice all over the world. So we think about that plain pine coffin, and we remember those words that Micah said, to walk humbly with our God. A plain pine coffin, so that he chose that, so there would be no mistaking that he had any sense of privilege. What a beautiful act that was. What can we learn from that? I wonder what you learned from that, what you took home from that. And so we know that the world looks different now. A little bit like Mary and Joseph, they know everything has changed forever because of that short delay, those 3 days that Jesus visited with the elders in Jerusalem. Everything was different and always would be. And yet, they pondered, they took the time to think, to try to figure out what that meant for them. And so we are invited to do the same, knowing that we can't do it all in a day, that this is not a year that we're going to start on a high note, as you know, with Omicron. But we are resilient, aren't we? We have this wonderful community. We have the strength of our caring for each other. And we need to really hone those skills and rely on that mutual strength, that spider web that no one else can see, but we can feel as we go into 2022. So our lives are still uncertain, just as they were at this time last year. Just as it was for Mary and Joseph, wondering why Jesus was late coming home from Jerusalem. We learn so much, don't we, looking at that ancient story. There are always surprises. There are always things that are different this year. And yet there are some continuities. Christ invites us to find them through the help of the sacred Spirit. And I wonder what they'll be for you. I believe it has something to do with the light of Christ. Beyond words, beyond even a strong visual image, deeper than that. As St. Paul said, as deep as a sigh, closer to us than our breath. The light that is love, that is God, that is not extinguished, beckons us as we go into the new year. May we see that light and keep it, however it wavers, going forward a day at a time. Amen.